Man of the earth.
What's up, guys? MMA Economics here, and today we'll be talking about the state of Tony Ferguson with his career. As you guys all know, he is fighting Michael Chiesa on August 3rd, and today we'll be talking about, will that be Tony Ferguson's last fight? Now, as you guys all know, he's been on a very terrible, underwhelming, underperforming losing streak, fighting Nate Diaz, Paddy Pimblett, Bobby Green, and people before that, of course, like Charles Oliveira, Beneil Dariush, and Justin Gaethje. But lately, man, he's just been looking just not good at all. He's been showing his age, truthfully. I think in that Nate Diaz fight, he looked the worst of himself. I know it was a weight class above, but man, he just looked like a true shell of himself. You know, it just reminds me of what Shogun Rua kind of looked like in his last couple of years before he retired. He just looks slow. He can't take shots well anymore. And you just, you can just tell it's, in my opinion, it's time to hang up the gloves soon for a guy like him. Now he's going back up to welterweight, fighting Michael Chiesa for his next fight. And honestly, towards my overall prediction and my overall assumption of the fight, I think Tony Ferguson yet again loses this fight. If you look at his past fights, even when he was in his win streak, like Kevin Lee, guys like Kevin Lee, Charles Oliveira, Beneil Dariush, wrestle-fucked him. He got wrestle-fucked. And didn't use his jiu-jitsu. And I will say the only way for Tony Ferguson, in my opinion, to win this fight, there's only two options. It's either submission on the ground while Chiesa's, ragdolling him around on the wrestling, or a very good decisive decision using the striking, which I don't really know if that's going to happen against a guy like Michael Chiesa, which can get his takedowns. I will say we don't really know where Chiesa's at right now, since he hasn't fought in a good while and he is getting old, just as Tony Ferguson is. But if you see the miles on each of the guys, Tony Ferguson has way more miles, man. That Nate Diaz fight alone, he just didn't look like he belonged there. He didn't look like he belonged in the UFC at all. And now he's going back up to welterweight, the weight class that he fought Nate Diaz on. It doesn't make any sense. But for him, I'd say this is not a good fight for him. I'd say he would be, there's odds up, I'm not sure. He's the underdog, clearly. And I think Michael Chiesa has to really fuck up in this fight to lose against Tony Ferguson, I believe. And that begs the question, is this Tony's last fight? And I really believe if Tony Ferguson loses this next fight against Michael Chiesa, I think he will retire. Now, I don't know if he's actually gonna, put his gloves down and retire. He's not the type, he's always gonna want to fight more. I believe his tenacity, his mindset. But I think the UFC, will give him a call, or just say, hey man, we can't have you anymore. You have been on an 8-fight losing streak, and you just don't look like yourself. And I think that's what's going to happen. I think he's either going to retire or he's going to get released by the UFC. And if you look on the fight card for Sandhagen versus Nurmagomedov, which they're fighting on August 3rd, they're not even the co-main event. They're not even the third fight. they're the first fight on the main card, which I think is ridiculous. You know, they're below Mackenzie Dern and Lupita Godinez. Like, what the fuck? In my opinion, that's outrageous, but I think the UFC knows what's going to happen in this fight, and it's going to be hard for them to put Tony Ferguson losing yet again in the spotlight. And I think the UFC is understanding that Tony's more than likely going to lose this fight. And I think with that being said, I really don't know what they can do with Tony Ferguson after this fight against Michael Chiesa. Now I'm rooting for Tony, man. He has to win this fight. It's do or die. If he wins this fight, I will say, I think the UFC will let him obviously stay in the UFC, but I just don't see him winning. I don't. This is a tough matchup. You know, Chiesa, he's not the most, entertaining fighter. He's a rather boring fighter. And I think he's going to keep this a very boring, grappling heavy fight, as he usually does. And if that does happen, in which he loses, and more than likely, in my opinion, I think he retires. I think this does not at all, in my opinion, affect the legend of himself. If you look at that 12-fight win streak alone, he's a legend for that, And even in these bad losses, El Cucuy is El Cucuy. He's tough. He will always be there. If you see that Charles Oliveira armbar, that was pure toughness. I don't think any other guy would not tap to that. I think any other guy would absolutely tap to that, but Tony Ferguson didn't. He's tough, son of a gun. And it's going to be an interesting fight, but, I think this is it for him. And it's a rather sad answer, but this is the truth. This is what I think about this fight. And if you look at the last fights of Tony Ferguson, it just doesn't look like himself at all. And I just hope he gets the win, but unfortunately I don't think he does. And it's the sad truth. If you look at Tony Ferguson, how he is right now, I just don't think he'll be able to do it. And I think it's time. I think that will be his last fight in the UFC at least. And it's a tough pill to swallow for most Tony Ferguson fans, but it does not stem the fact that he is a legend. The 12-fight winning streak, everything about him, his tenacity, his mindset. He is the El Cucuy. Whether he does have a 7-fight losing streak or not, he's always a legend, and he will always be known as the Boogeyman. But with that being said, thank you guys for watching this video. Like and subscribe and comment and all of that. And I'll see you guys on the next one.